So, did you have lunch? Did you have coffee? Coffee is the thing that you will need. So, first, thank you for having me. This is my first time in Russia, so I'm super excited. If I pass out, it's okay. Just slap me. Everything is gonna be okay. So last year, this year actually, I got very interested, very curious about domain modeling and how we use types. This is part of my, let's say, grow mindset kind of thing, learn one new thing every year that is not specifically like a language or patterns. So I was like, okay, how do we do things in our day-to-day and how they relate to the real world? Are the same types, are the same things that we represent in code similar to what we actually live in our lives? And the first step was something like this. It's Monday morning. You have, how many Kotlin developers do we have in the room? This is so nice. Scala? Oh, that was one, cool. Swift, out of curiosity, nice. JavaScript. Okay, this is cool. So syntax will be in Kotlin. Most of the stuff is basically language agnostic. I would say you can do the same things in every language, either manually or with the help of libraries. So just stick with me for half an hour with Kotlin syntax. If you are not familiar, just ask, stop me, or no big things. So this is what I get. My Monday decided, basically product people decided that we need a user profile. Why? Because why not? Everybody has a user profile screen. And this is how the backend people sends the user profile to me. So they are like mostly savages, so they send nulls all over the place. We don't trust them. And that's why we get nullable strings, because you never know, okay? You want to make JSON or Moshi happy. You start slow. Everything is nullable. I don't want to be surprised by things. If you were here a couple of hours ago when RJ was talking about the Lyft app, and they started receiving nulls that they weren't expecting, and the whole iOS app just wasn't working. Yeah, been there, done that, and that's why I get a nullable. Then we start talking. So you get the first thing in, and then you start thinking about, okay, but in my domain, a user profile, a user can't actually have a nullable name. So we go from the DTO, it's just the JSON retrofit kind of stuff that I get, to what a user profile looks like in our domain. Okay, so first thing first, well, we are sure that a user doesn't have a nullable first name and last name, so we just take away the nullable. And then we move on from here, because then we start realizing that, well, you can do something like this, because that's just a string. And then you're like, okay, this is not working, because, well, you can't have just an empty name or empty last name. You can't have like a new line or a tab character, or, I don't know, numbers or dash or whatever. You just have, now you already have your first problem, because string is not good anymore. So string is not representing what a user profile or a first name and a last name are in your domain. We call this primitive obsession, or obsession with primitives. So we all do that. We think about a number, it's going to be an int. If it has like a comma, or probably it's going to be a float. And if everything else, it's just a string. But in real life, there are very few, or quite a few things that are so-called unbounded. Like, they don't come with a constraint of some type. For instance, a first name, well, cannot be empty. A last name cannot be empty. Yes, probably Beyonce will be kind of upset in our code base, or Prince, or I don't know, whatever. But no, we decided that our product, last name and first name, cannot be empty strings. So you start playing around with Kotlin stuff, and you say, okay, string is not good enough. I'm going to be with type alias. Okay, and I said, boom, type alias. Okay, it works. It's not a string anymore. And then you start creating user profiles. Well, actually, the thing is a string. It's just not visibly a string, but because it's a type alias, so it's not a string. It's a string, but it's not a string. It's even worse than just putting string there, because now you see something that looks like a type, but it's not. Plus, there's a lot of facepalm when you go through this stuff. But the user profile starts to look different. At least you, from a visual point of view, you got rid of the primitive. So next thing that I tried was inline classes. Okay, you have something a bit fancier from Kotlin. The whole thing is like, I'm going to wrap a primitive, but it's going to be a type, but you don't have any problem when it runs. The compiler is going to do the magic, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So you can't actually pass a string anymore in there. Okay, you have to pass a first name and a last name object. Problem is that you can do this. Because, you work with very smart people, they actually want to piss you off big time, so they try every possible way of passing invalid input in your objects. And you're like, okay, I'm getting there, so we know what's the problem. We also hate our colleagues because, why would you do that? Just, we are a team. Just give me a break. So the idea is that in inline class, it's kind of okay because it's a type, but again, it doesn't have the power of giving you constraints. And that's what we actually need. So we need something that it's better, and we start with just creating a type. It's going to be just a standard class. We make the constructor private because just stop creating empty string, last name and first name. So we don't allow creating an object right away. What we do is something called smart constructor, because we like fancy words, but it's actually just a factory method, nothing major. But now we have the ability of actually validate the input in place. So whenever you want to create a first name, we have this little snippet of code that actually validates the input. And if everything is okay, we get back a first name, or we get back a null. So if you start thinking about that, this also simplifies a lot the testing part, because now every validation logic for a first name is in that thing. And well, you can write a unit test that it's pretty neat. And if the logic changes, you just change in place. So you have now something that allows you to think about a first name object in a way that, okay, if I have a first name, it's a valid first name. There is no way around, okay? Because it went through a generation, like a creation method that validates the input. If I can get my hands on a first name object, it's good, 100%. And this is basically how we use it. We can extend the same approach to last name. Validation for last name can be more complex. You have multiple words. So you can pick whatever makes sense for your domain. And now the user profile actually looks like something that is strictly typed, heavily typed. This is how we use the factory, the constructor, and we want to create a valid user profile, and that's what we do. The problem is that now we have null checks everywhere, okay? So this is so 90s. It's super, come on. We are better than this. Nulls, we have the language that can help us, and that's probably one of the main issues, because now you have first name and nullable first name. But you say, I don't want to use the null check like this. We have Kotlin. I want to make it a bit better, a bit fancier. So I'm going to go with this. So, the question mark dot let. So now you have it. It's still ugly, but you also have the nested thing. So it's also, you also improved on, okay, make it even harder to read. But at least we don't have nulls everywhere. So we're just gonna glance on this. We go back with what we have, and we start rethinking what's the actual problem here. We don't want to have invalid first names. But now we live in a world where there is this nullable first name. This is actually a thing. So in Kotlin, you can think about, now we have a first name and a nullable first name. They are two separate things. They behave in a different way. You can pass a nullable first name to somebody that is expecting a non-nullable first name. So that's already, well, you see it. There are two types. And then you start having these multiple types everywhere in your code base, and your code base becomes like half of the time stuff that you don't need. Because I only need a first name or nothing. Okay, I don't want to know about invalid first name. There is nothing like an invalid first name in my domain. Either I have a last name or a first name, or there is nothing that I can work with. So the thing that we need to think about is, how do we represent actually the absence of a value? Okay, when you ask for a passport, they need your first name, your last name. If everything is in check, if everything is okay, they give you a passport. Okay. If something is wrong, they don't give you anything. There is no like, oh, hey, here you go, a nullable passport. That's not how reality works, okay? So the thing is, either I get a passport and I know that the passport will be okay everywhere, because that's how the passport domain works. Okay, everybody can check a passport wherever I go in the world, because, well, that's a passport. If I have a passport, well, there's still forgery, so, but that's a different. But if I have a passport, that's good. If I don't have a passport, I can't board the plane, okay? But there is nothing like, okay, yeah, hi, I'm at security check. This is my nullable passport because, I mean, the last name wasn't good enough, so they give me a nullable passport. Can you two-string it and print it? I don't know. No, that doesn't work. So what we need to do is represent the absence of a value. And functional programming, fancy names, functional programming, they have it, and they have it in shape of an option. You have it in every language. Java has it. Every Scala has it. We are gonna use a library for this because there is no native support, but you can use it with Arrow, basically. If you're interested in open source, this is a nice, huge project. You just drop a couple of lines in your Gradle file, ta-da, now you have this thing. Option is it's a container type. It's a wrapper. You can imagine it as a box, okay? It's a box where you can put something in it. And in our case, we're gonna put a first name in the box, okay? This is how it works. You create an option of first name, and the box can contain, oh, sorry, lunch. The box can contain a first name, or the box is empty. Okay, that's it. There's no nullable first name in the thing. Either you get something in the box, or you get an empty box. This actually allows us to think about what we do with our types in a very different way, because now we have a very clear way to represent, I wasn't able to get the thing that I asked for, I have to deal with it. But I know for sure how to use this, because option, like a lot of other types, if you're familiar with the list, they come with a lot of familiar methods that we can use. But this is how we use it in a blocks. It's called effect blocks. So we basically request two option one containing a last name and one containing a first name. And in this block, we only deal with the happy path. So this is our little happy block. The line number 5 will always be okay if both of them are okay. This is how we do it, okay? We basically ask for, I want a block where I'm sure 100% that there is something in the box. Easy. And if something is in the box in both of them, I can actually create a user profile right away. But now you start thinking, okay, what if one of them is actually not there? How does it work? And the way it works is like this option effect block can be converted to a method, to a function that returns you an optional user profile. This is how the whole password thing works. So you say, okay, this is my name, potential name. This is my potential valid last name. They are both strings. They could be anything. But then to make a user profile, you have to create the user first name, create the last name. They have to be valid. And if everything goes nicely and smoothly, you get back a user profile. Or, well, you get an empty box. So you can actually create this chain of things that need to be valid and things that need to be okay in your domain to be used. This is just the super happy path. And you can also achieve this with a method that we are all familiar with, like map. Map, if you call map on an option, it's going to give you a nice little block where it's actually the first name, it's there. That's the happy path block. Basically, it's always positive. Okay, so if you want to work with your first name only, if you want to print it only if it's actually there, you just dot map, and in that block, the first name will be valid. Same goes for fold. That actually gives you the opportunity to work with both the happy path and something very bad happened path. So you have a first lambda where, well, the box is empty, and you can do whatever you want. And the second one is basically like the first one, so you have something in the box, and you can do whatever you want. This is how you access the value. You access the value in the box. And now we know how to represent the absence of a value in our domain. And you start building these chains of validation. And then the product people come, there is a new sprint, and well, now we have an email in our profile. First thing first, nullable, because, I mean, we don't trust the backend people, we also don't talk to them. So everything has to be nullable. I'm just kidding. They are lovely people, and they are struggling as we all struggle. We also got a send email method for free because we are working in a multi-team environment. So some other Android or iOS team, they just got us a new fancy send mail method. We can't access the source code. We just know the API. This is it. The thing is returning nothing and getting 2 strings. Way to go, people. So the first thing we can do as very passionate and empathic people is just sending an email to an empty email address because that's what you do, right? And this is not gonna work, okay? Even if it's kind of gonna work, I mean, how this thing can be considered deterministic? I mean, it doesn't. The thing that you should do at this point is write probably 400 million unit tests to be sure that everything works fine. If I'm sending you some weird stuff, everything that has to be in place, not null, not empty, not containing, we know how to do this. So instead of sending a string, we send an email object, okay? Because I want to send an email. And basically, we build an email object the same way that we build the first name. Plus, there is a bit of copy-paste from Stack Overflow, because, I mean, who does that, right? I mean, if you are good with regular expression, I have the greatest respect for you. I'm good with copy-pasting. So this is how you do it. Just performance-wise, you should pull that thing out, because building a regular expression is heavy. So just as a tip, Marcin is going to talk about this in the efficient Kotlin talk. But jokes aside, this is the same stuff, okay? You have a validation logic, and now you have an email. The email is going to be valid from a shape point of view. It's going to look like an email. We don't know if it's actually an existing email address, because you can't know that. You just need to send an email and wait. But you can be sure that, you know, it will be something like even@whatever.com looks like an email. So good enough. And this is how we do it. So you wrap the normal method with the safe send email method, and now you have a nice way to actually send email, because, well, the message is a string, fair enough, but the email is a type. So you don't need to write 2 gazillion tests, because your validation logic is in the type. You just need an email object. Cool. The thing is still weird, because we don't get any output from that, but you know, you work with what you have. Okay, it's a new day, it's a new sprint. People realize that, well, you should actually verify the email. It's just put some random email there. No, you just, you know, normal people verify the email. So we got a new Boolean, fancy Boolean from the backend people. At least it's not a nullable Boolean, because the nullable Boolean is like the three states Boolean, because it can be false, true, and null. So it's like, it's supposed to be like Boolean, but it can be also null. So at least I keep off the nullable part. But now we have this new thing, and we also have new fancy method with this stuff. One is for sending a verification email, and one is to send a reset email. So how do we use them? Of course, if you have an unverified email, you send a verification email. If you have a verified user, you send surveys, you can send a password reset, you can do the basic stuff. And this is how you use it, okay? If the user is verified, you send the verification email, or otherwise you send the password reset, right? Ah, nice. Yes, it's wrong. This is the correct one, okay? You know, you see how this is, you see how easy it is to actually misuse it? Super error prone. That was just a Boolean there, right? So the problem is that we are basically trying to represent the state of an email with a Boolean. So now everybody has to remember about the Boolean. You onboard new people in your team, everybody has to check for the Boolean. Because, well, I can't send a reset password if you're not verified. Fun fact, if you are verified and the user changes the email address, are you still verified? No, right? So you need to verify the new email address. So now everybody has to remember that if they change the email, they also need to change the Boolean. So you are adding accidental complexity, plus I don't want to remember this stuff. I mean, everybody has, did you check the Boolean? I don't know. I thought you checked the Boolean. You know, that kind of stuff. Tyler Darden shit that you're talking to, I mean, you coded this stuff. It was 2 weeks ago. I can't remember anything. I have a drinking problem. You know, that kind of attitude. So if you start thinking about what you want to do, this is how our domain looks like, okay? This, if you have an email, right away it's unverified, okay? If you verify the email, Well, the thing is actually meant to be used for the by the marketing people. You can reset the password. The support team can send support email to the user. They are two completely different things that we actually want to represent with one type, and this weird Boolean that is like floating around, like like a satellite. Everybody has to know about it. And why? Put the state in the type. That's it. You have an unverified email, but that contains an email. Yeah, because it can't get simpler than that. Every email by default is an unverified email. And then you have the actual one, the other one. It's a verified email. And we are going to protect it with a private constructor so nobody can do weird stuff, because the only way to get a verified email, how do you get a verified email? You need to verify an unverified email, okay? So you start putting the business rules in the type itself. The user profile now changes because we have verifiable email, because now the email can be two things at a time. Nothing fancy in Kotlin, we have sealed class, so you create a very small hierarchy where there is a verifiable email and it can be unverified and can be verified. So you're gonna pattern matching on the type, pretty straightforward. The way you do the verified email management, how you verify an email? Well, you just put a verify method the way we are used to, nothing fancy there. And this is actually the nice part, because now to get a verified email, now we have input that has to be there. So we need an unverified email because we need something to start from. Plus we need somebody that is able to tell us the thing is good or the thing is not good. And you pass in a verification service. So the dependencies are in the factory itself. This is, of course, oversimplified because, you have a bit of, multi-threading, so the thing could be probably a suspend function. I want to keep it simple. I want to give you the idea. So there is a verification service can tell you, well, the thing is good. I'm reading one Boolean from a database. There is a yes is verified on the database. It gives you back a verified email, or it gives you back an empty box. If you think that this was overkill, everybody's gonna be able to remember the Boolean, this is more than that. It's not just a syntax thing or like, I can't remember stuff. It's more like a domain problem, because a verified email is meant to be used in a specific way. You can only pass like a reset password link to a verified email. And I can give you one nice, expensive example how this thing can go wrong. Because a few months ago, 7-Eleven is like a chain of gas station store, something, all over the planet. They released the new fancy mobile app, and they had also payments in it, okay? You go to the store, you pay with your app. So far, so good. They needed user management, so they introduced the user profile. And when you introduce a user profile, you also introduce the password reset, right? So the idea was, I need to reset my password. What I'm gonna need? My name. And they were like, okay, if people actually forgot their password, what if they forgot also the email? So they were like, okay, I'm gonna put my username and my email address, and I get a reset password link. And something goes, okay, so I can put your username and my email password, and what's gonna happen? And they're gonna send your reset link to me. Okay, this is interesting. And I was like, okay, this is not gonna work, okay? This is too dangerous. But we need it. We can improve this. And they realized, okay, let's put also the date of birth. So you need the username, the email and your birth date, basically. So they were like, okay, now we are safe. From an external point of view, somebody was like, okay, I can check on Twitter, on Facebook, I just get the birth date. It was even better because in the user profile, when they were asking for your birthday, there was no need. I just want to buy stuff at the gas station. So the date of birth was not mandatory. And then you have a domain problem because, okay, if the date is not there, but I need to send a reset password, how do we do it? The box is empty, okay? I don't have every requirement to send the email address because I need a username, an email, and a date. The date is not there, the thing is empty. I was like, okay, boom, we go default. So if the user doesn't put anything there, we default to January the 1st, 1970. Cool, now you have a date, you have a username, and you have an email address. And they shipped the app. Turns out after about 6-7 hours, they started having like complaints by the users because, well, they were, charged money that they weren't actually spending. They looked into number and they realized that somebody had wrote a script that actually started to brute force with the default date the whole user database that was leaked some months ago. So they had the usernames, the email was my email, the attacker email, and the date, well, let's go for 1st of January. Who cares? They stole €500,000 in 8 hours before they shut down everything after 2 days. They are still talking about giving the money back to the users, but that's another question. So this is actually serious stuff. You need to think about what happens when you don't have the data that you need or the data that you expect. The good thing will have been, first of all, come on, get your shit together. It's just a reset password form. You are not going to Mars. Probably somebody also thought about that. The other one is the email and the date thing. If the date is not there, the box is empty. That's it. It's simple. But now we are thinking about, okay, when you do the string is nullable and you do the question mark, Elvis operator, and then you pass the empty string. That's how we do default nowadays, right? If you don't have a date, I'm going to give you local time .now because we have types, but we don't have the information about the domain. What happens if the date is not there? And you start talking with the product people and they look at you like a deer in front of a car. We don't know. Put a default. And then, yeah, that's how you do it. Put the default, right? So domain modeling is actually way more complex than just syntax. It's not just a type. It's nullable or not nullable. What happens if you don't have the information? So if you want to go back to the things that we are trying to use, first of all, we realize that, okay, now we have types, okay? There is no way that you can pass the wrong email with the wrong state to wrong method. We took care of that. The thing that we don't know is what happened in the wrong scenario. This thing is not returning anything. If you take, for instance, the first method, just as an example, what if I give you a valid email? You don't know. Is it going to blow up for some reason? We don't know. So the thing that you can do is you start using it. Okay? Just give it a try. I put an email, something pops up in my inbox. Okay, I mean, if the email is good, I don't get any error, at least. Or if there is no internet, the thing blows up, Retrofit just starts yelling at you. If the internet is slow, again, socket timeout. Or if I put even at whatever.com, I legitimately get the email does not exist. So now we can actually build a better way of representing these error scenarios. Because, well, happy path, okay, we send the email, fair. No internet is kind of IO exception means no internet, but you know that it's IO exception means no internet, but if I talk to product people, they don't know. So let's start building a shared language we can talk to everybody and they can understand. No internet, my mom can understand no internet. Probably socket time exception, probably slow internet, whatever. So this is how it can look, okay? So you have the good scenario, ponies, rainbows, and verification email sent. Cool. Problems on the second level, verification email not sent, and you can have no internet, no timeout, just keep it generic, and wrong access. Cool. Now we know how to represent the good stuff and the bad stuff. The problem that we have is that the method is only returning one thing. But we have at least two sides of the possibility. We could do with the seal class, throw everything in the seal class. It's kind of meh, because we lose the fact that we have two sides of a coin. In functional programming, we have another container type. It's called either. Either is basically something that contains two types, and either you get the one on the left or you get the one on the right. This is pretty straightforward, because, you know, very creative people. Either you get one, either you get the other one. And this is how you use it. Super straightforward. We wrap everything in a try-catch, because that's what we have at the moment. The method is throwing an exception. If everything goes good, we know how to send back. We set the result right with a verification email sent, .write, boom. The .write, it's like some extension function, very smooth, cool stuff with Kotlin that will create an either with the right element populated. Either is a so-called exclusive OR, because the elements can be one or the other, but not together, like a pair. A pair will be, you know, also two at the same time. But either you get the left side or you get the right side. And for the problems, the exceptions, we have no internet.left, timeout.left, and wrong address.left. Left and right, they are more like a convention, because you usually have the wrong stuff on the left and the right stuff on the right. I mean, again, creative people, you know, those engineers. So now we know how to represent something that can be two things or two sets of things in a very contained way. And either, like list or like option, has methods like map or fold. So when you get a result back, you can do .map, and you will have a nice block where you have the happy path. Either is so-called right biased. So if you do .map, you end up in the valid, the right branch. Or you can do fold, and you get the two blocks where you have the errors on one side or the result in another side, like more like Rx, you know, on error and on next kind of thing. So this is actually getting richer, because now we have more types that can do more things, but it stays familiar because you have the same methods on everything. And yeah, so the product people don't sleep, because the moment I basically solve the problem, they come up with another challenge, because, you know, there are only opportunities, there are no problems. So now they are like, okay, we want to get to the users by phone, and you're like, this is 2020 almost, who's gonna call you? And they're like, yeah, we are a bank. And you say, okay, yes, okay, now I get it. So we also have a phone number now. And it came back as a string, because, you know, Savage on the backend team. And but we know how to do it, okay? We can validate. We have the whole regular expression that smart people on Stack Overflow wrote for the internationalization and that kind of stuff. So now we have a phone number there. Smooth. Perfect. So it's a Monday again, and you are actually product people, you can't catch a break, okay? They have this brilliant idea, and you're like, who's gonna send me something by mail? And they're like, we are a bank, so we are gonna send you the PIN via email, your card via email, via postal mail. Okay, so you know how to validate a postal address. You can check your stuff. I don't know, your customers are only in Germany or in Russia. You can check the zip code. You know, you can do your validation. And eventually you reach a point where if you have a postal address, you know that you can actually deliver mail to them. Cool, our domain is solid. Problem is, this thing is super weird and Uncle Bob is not happy, not even a bit, because for everything that the product people come up with, you are changing the user profile. So the Git history of this 4 lines of code is getting like very, very, very intense. You know the whole close open principles that you shouldn't be opening and changing the file all the time. Well, you sit and you start thinking, okay, this thing, we are adding stuff, okay? Every time that we want to contact the user, you add another property to the user profile. And this starts to look like a list. And, well, the thing is, if it looks like a list and grows like a list, it's a list. There is nothing fancy there. So instead of changing the user profile constantly, you just throw a list there, done. You create a nice contact info field class because field class solves the things. And now you have email, phone, postal address. So if they come up with something else, we are pretty confident that we are good to go, okay? So you brace yourself, it's Friday, you enjoy your weekend. Monday morning, as usual, they come up with something else. And they realize that, you know, there is climate changing, Greta, Friday for Future. They want to send pigeons because apparently they are like sustainable thing. They want to go like full green. But now you got it covered. I still don't know how you will validate a pigeon contact information thing, but that's probably like a domain problem. So you're going to talk to a domain expert, and they're going to tell you this is how you validate the pigeon. The next thing that they actually asked you, because there was a slow Monday, is that they want at least one way to contact the user. And you ask which one, and they say, we don't know, it doesn't matter, as long as it's one. So you see, this is a conversation with your product people. You know, they're like shrug, and you're like, yes, but which one do we? I mean, there can be the option? No, they won't. If you make them optional, what if they are like all empty boxes? No, you need at least one, but you don't know which one. And then you're like, okay, this is good. We are just gonna check if the list is empty. Okay, we have if empty, and every time you want to contact the user, you check if the list is empty. You know that it's not gonna be empty because, the backend knows, the database knows when the user actually registered, they had to put at least something in the field, in the form. So it cannot be empty. But you're also paranoid because, what if it's empty? So you're gonna check. Everybody's always gonna check is empty, is empty, is empty. Until you get new people on board and they're gonna ask you why are we checking is empty? I don't know. There was a business requirement, then started during a conversation at the water cooler, then it became a Slack message, then it became a Jira ticket, and then it became a Confluence page. And Confluence is where actually documentation goes to die. Because the moment it gets on Confluence, it's over, okay? This is basically Google search second page. Nobody's gonna ever look at it, never, okay? So if you want to hide, I don't know, some crime thing, you just put it in Confluence and you are safe. The problem is, this is a serious thing. It's a serious business requirement. The list cannot be empty. What we can do is, well, we are good at typing now. Well, sounded different in my mind. So we are not good at typing. We are good at types. How can we create a type that enforces the fact that there is at least one element in a list? Turns out there is a non-empty list already in Arrow. And you're like, a non-empty list? What? Yeah, that's the exact creative people. You remember the creative people thing? Yes, a non-empty list is a list that cannot be empty. So it has to be at least one element. It acts like a kind of normal list. You can do the same stuff, but you have a lot of new things like, well, there's always going to be a first element. There's always going to be a last element. But the important part that now we moved the business rules from Jira or Confluence to the code. Because if I show this user profile to one of my new colleagues, first of all, they're going to ask, the hell is a non-empty list? And then going to check the documentation. Okay, it cannot be empty. Duh. But that's it. Okay? So it's an unfamiliar concept that it's not even a computer science concept. It's just English. Okay? It cannot be empty. Cool? And now they know how to use it. Plus, you literally can't create a list that does not contain an element. There is no constructor. You have to put something in it. And that simplifies a lot. It takes away a lot of accidental complexity and things that you always forget and you have to remember. So this is just the, like I would say, the tip of the iceberg, because Arrow is huge. There are other types. Try, it's basically something that can blow up, because in functional programming, they basically don't use exceptions, okay? Because, well, I don't want to go into the fancy purity, whatever. No, exceptions are just bad because they are irresponsible and they are selfish. Because think about it. You try to do something, you can't get your shit together, and you just wrap it and you pass it to the next poor person that, okay, this thing is ticking, okay, click, tick, tack, that doesn't feel safe. What do? I don't know. I mean, and then you pass it along, and at some point there is the operative system, and they say, okay, what do I do with this stuff? And it blows up, okay? This is how our exception works. They don't represent anything in our life. I always have an example. A friend of mine, it was like, you know, when you go to the bakery and you want to buy bread, they don't have bread, and they tell you, we don't have bread, come later. And then you go 1 hour later, or in the afternoon, or tomorrow. Okay, exponential bake-off. Okay, you come back later. When you have exception, you go to the bakery, you ask for bread. They don't have bread, and they just shoot themselves in the head. That's exception. And you are like there, okay, you are completely, there is brain and blood everywhere. You are like, what the fuck happened? What was it? First of all, oh my God, I just wanted bread. Okay? So if you start thinking about exception that way, well, like, oh, yeah, I mean, I can be better than that. I mean, yeah, probably shotgun your head. It's not the actual adult response when you don't have bread. So why they will be okay when I don't have your first name? So that's how try works. Basically, it represents a function or an operation that can throw an exception, but instead of throwing an exception, you give you back, well, a nice block where the exception is it. It's a box that can contain what you're asking for, or a throwable. It's pretty simple. It has the same fold and map stuff. If you do map, it goes to the success. If you have fold, you have the success block and your throwable. If you think about basic stuff, you're always familiar with UUID or get URI, you know, from Android, that stuff. You say, okay, I'm going to give you a string, and you're going to give me back URI object. You know, dot parse, everything is cool. And then you actually pass in something that doesn't look like HTTP URL, and everything blows up. And you have to look at the documentation and Google like, yeah, you know, in case the thing is not valid, we're going to throw an exception at you. That's how you will use a try. You know, give me always something back that is deterministic. But that's a completely other subject. So please try to be mindful and try to take care of the next person, because you know, it's better than just throwing a ticking bomb. Things like IOR, it's like either, but you can also have left and right at the same time. Well, if you need it, why not? Validated is super cool, because when you are like creating a registration form and you need every field that has to be, you know, in a specific format, you can use validate, and you basically, if your name is not good or the last name is not good, you're gonna get back a list of errors, but with a specific thing, like, you know, the first name was not good, but the email was okay. The last name was not good. So validated is pretty useful when you want to build this kind of registration forms or, you know, edit forms. I/O is basically another advanced topic for asynchronous stuff in a more functional way. They have a lot of support for RxJava and suspendable function wrappers, but this is something that probably we're going to see in the Android world next year, getting a bit more momentum. But you know, to wrap up, I want to just give you like the 4 things that I believe strongly that we need to embrace as engineers when we think about the product that we are building. Domain modeling, it sounds fancy, but it's very basic stuff. You know, you need to build something that is okay, like a shared language that you can use with everybody. Because if I have a email string with a isVerified Boolean, and I go to the marketing people, you know what? You need to check that the string is not empty and the Boolean is true. To send a survey, they're going to look at you, what are you talking about? But if you go there and say, you know, we need a verified email, okay, yeah, indeed, we need a verified email. So you build this language that for you is actually easier to remember, because it's the same stuff that everybody else is talking about. So just, you know, embrace the fact that you can enforce that kind of language in your type system. And everything gets more deterministic, because you don't need to do checks all over the place, because you have types. I mean, if a method is getting a passport object, I can't throw in a string. Well, there is no way. And yeah, we get far from Jira. That is always nice. We put the requirements in the code. And then forces you to think about when things go wrong, what do we do? You know, like the default date. What if we don't have a birthday? And if you want to read more, just as a reference, the thing is gonna send you to Amazon Spain or whatever. There was just a link that, but this is a nice book about domain modeling with functional programming. It's for F#, but basically the concepts are applicable to every possible language, because they are just concept. And this is it. And I thank you a lot for coming and enduring this almost 1 hour of nerd stuff. And thank you. So if we have questions, cool. If you don't feel comfortable asking here, I'm going to be outside. If you don't feel comfortable about talking, I can repeat the question, whatever suits you.
Okay. We do have some questions.
You have like a blind.
Hi, thank you for your talk. It was interesting and fun.
Thank you.
So I have one practical question. For example, we have the app with one button, and that it can be anything. Request a taxi, request a food or flight, and this button can be in 4 states. Nothing, it wasn't pressed. Doing something, processing, so I'm sending requests. The job is done, and we received error. So how do you think we can model this with some types?
you want to model the state of the button itself.
Yeah, for states of processing some job.
Okay. Well, I will go for something like MVI-ish, you know, where you have basically the button itself is a SIL class, or the state of the button is a SIL class, because you want to actually model the fact that you are loading or you got an error. So the backend is probably up to you. You can do RX Java, you can do every fancy stuff that you want. From a UI point of view, I would probably go with the MVI approach, where you have a state for the button that it's a SIL class. And again, this is not a silver bullet per se. It's more like a mindset. You start thinking about, you're already on the right track, because you're already thinking about what's the loading stage. You know, what do we do when we get an error? That's already 90% better than a lot of other companies. They're just, you click the thing and does it work? So you're already doing good domain modeling, because you are thinking about, well, the thing is still running, or the thing failed. So I would say, keep thinking like that, and then you figure out the technicality with your team. It has to be an holistic exercise. It's not just up to you to come up with a solution, because product can give you a lot of information about, you know, the business thing, or the priorities. What if they don't care about the errors? Just whatever. Just show again the button. For the state, yeah, because you have a deterministic 4 possibilities, because you can have more than one value for the field class. I will go for that. Keep it simple. Thank you. Anybody? Oh, there was a gentleman, or like an attendee. I don't want to assume your gender, sorry.
First of all, I would like to thank you for a really good talk. It's really interesting. Yeah. I have a very controversial question.
Please.
I have to warn about this. Regarding the result type, don't you think that it is in some way very similar to checked exceptions? Basically, you have either a success or you have failure, and in both cases you have to somehow process it. And the main difference is that one comes from basically the imperative paradigm, and the other one comes from the functional. Would you agree with me?
Well, the thing is, they are either option, or if you go I/O, because you are probably referring the network call goes south. What do we do? They are composable. That's the difference.
Right.
So I'm giving you back an object. With I/O, it's even better, because they are deferred, they are lazy. It's like if you're familiar with RX Java.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you build a single, you just put it in a variable. It does nothing until you subscribe. I/O is the same. Until you run it, it does nothing. So that's the thing. It's a variable. It's not something, you know, that happened. It's just that you can do whatever you want, and you can compose them. And that's how you can go from one to another. If you have a try, you can do 2 options, because you don't care about the exception. You know, you can convert something that can blow up to, well, an empty box, because I'm not going to use the throwable, for instance. So you have this a lot of opportunities to actually work with the values, instead of just see them exploding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good thing.
It takes a moment,
composability and laziness. I got write it down.
It's unfamiliar, and that's for sure. But you get it pretty quickly, because you see, oh, okay, like I can do this and this. Ah, nice. I don't have to nest 15 try catch because something can. So it's useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other
We have
question?
time for one more short question.
Hello, thank you for the fun. I have a question that is quite similar to the first question, if I understand it right. is there any chance that arrow can represent something called sum types? That is, for example, option is nothing or just something. I'm using Haskell.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that possibility.
Okay, but what if I have something that can be represented by one of, for example, 3 or 4 or 5 types? One type that should be one of 5 other types.
You mean like a sealed class?
Like sealed class, but if I understand it right, you can't use something that is inside a sealed class in another sealed class.
Well, no, because they are 2 separate hierarchies, right? I think it's union types.
Union types, yeah.
They are working on it. They are probably going to be able to do it with the arrow meta next year. That's cool. But there is a compiler plugin, a lot of fancy stuff that I don't know anything about. I just here for the cereals and the coffee. But jokes aside, they are working on it. So it's gonna be fun. Next year is gonna be fun. A lot of people in the Android industry are gonna step up their game big time, because it opens a lot of opportunities if you want to change careers. Because this stuff is the same stuff that Scala developers, Haskell developers, you know, the F# people are already doing. So if you want to keep doors open, you start looking at it, you use it on Android, and then you jump ship, you're good to go.